Silver here again with two not too black moms, and we decided to do a Hot Topics episode today because we've been talking about all the craziness in the media this week. And I also want to shout out my friend Navri of Milani Tutus, who did my shirt dress for me, and it says, "I can't keep calm, my boys are black." And that is going to kind of lead into some of the things we were talking about this week.
It's why we're here today, with this media Hot Topics, because there's a lot going on.
We were up until, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Chatting, yeah.
You know, we couldn't believe some of the crazy things that people have said or done this week. Yeah. And the things people have tried to justify. Like the whole Lecrae situation.
Yes, which we are definitely gonna be touching on that in a little bit. But,
yes, and the Aunt Jemima situation, the hanging of black people that's been.
And there's some Hispanic involved as well. Just really people of color.
That's also been they're trying to push it that it's suicide. And it's not.
Yeah. So we're going to touch on all of those things. But again, we kind of want to respect our time, your time. So I actually didn't get the timer set up, but I'm going to be watching the clock and trying to keep this a little bit short. If you guys don't remember, we've got 9 kids here between us. And so we might get interrupted, but we just want to kind of keep this conversation flowing despite these interruptions. So, Camille, why don't you, what's the deal with the whole Aunt Jemima thing? It's been around for a long time. You know, we see this uproar over these plastic packaging and branding. Can you kind of touch on that while I go deal with one of these children?
Absolutely. So, I'll start off with the conversation I had online last night where there was a woman who was very upset that she no longer had her butter, her syrup, and her rice anymore. And I explained to her that unless she has major stock in those companies, they don't belong to her anyway, but that it is offensive. The symbols that were on the Land O'Lakes butter, the Aunt Jemima caricature, and the Uncle Ben's rice are all misrepresentations of black people, and they represent a time that we really don't want to keep living in. And also it represents it as something that was nice. Like, it was a good memory. Right. And it's not. Like, we don't want to be remembered as mammies and slaves and caregivers. We don't want to be remembered as the ones who had to neglect our own kids to care for the slave owners.
We don't want to be the help constantly.
Right. And it's like, it took me years to be comfortable wearing a red headband or a headscarf because of all of the Aunt Jemima jokes. And it's never been said as it's never been said complimentary. It's always as an insult. And those were all gross, mocking caricatures that are insulting to everyone of color who looks at them. And especially the Land O'Lakes butter,
I still don't understand how the U.S. We just did them wrong, so wrong, and we still do them wrong, and so much so. It's it's honestly mind-boggling to me how any of this is considered okay or celebrating. I had people it was such a great thing because the lady who played her, had money and a job. She was a slave. What jobs did she have? What options did she have? And she said one of her relatives, one of the actor's relatives, I can't remember which one because we're just kind of ranting and my brain's kind of going all over the place, was it was better to play a mammy than be one. Because literally that was your only job option as a female. She was born a slave. You have to understand her perspective of a job option came from being a slave. How are you? She isn't going to exactly be a school teacher. She's not going to be able to become a doctor. She was a slave.
Well, and the other thing too is that it just makes me think too. So there have been a lot of representations, and people are upset because movies like Gone with the Wind are being pulled and things like that. And it's they don't know how infuriating it is. When I was a kid, I used to love Shirley Temple. Spent every Saturday watching Shirley Temple marathons.
Yeah.
The Little Princess was one of my favorite movies. And so my mom decided for Christmas one year that she was going to get me a bunch of VHS tapes, telling my age a little bit, of Shirley Temple. And I was so excited, and I locked myself in my room, and I'm watching, and I see these black men shucking and jiving and acting. All the black people were portrayed as buffoons. And I was so angry that I took it out And I threw the VHS, and then I said, nope, you know what? I'm getting my money back. So I took it back to the store, and I was only like 15. Excuse me. I don't have corona. I choked a little bit. But I took it back to the store, and the lady asked, well, was there something wrong? I said, yes, this is racist. And it was offensive. And at 15 years old, I'm glad that I had sense enough to be able to convey that to her, but it is hurtful. Like, representation matters, and the kind of representation matters. For people of color, as children especially, to only see representations of themselves as thugs, as criminals, as dumb, as violent, sets the expectation that this, and
that's all you got.
Right. And like I said before, I'm a kid lady. I've been doing kids forever. One thing I know about kids is they will meet you at your expectation level. Mm-hmm. So if you call a child bad, if you call them stupid, they will only meet that bar. But if you encourage them and say things like, and if they see Black pilots, Black engineers, Black scientists, all of those things make them proud, and it opens up the door for them. So it's not a second thought of,
can I do this?
Right. And it's like, and this is 2020, and we are still having firsts for Black people.
Yeah.
The first, I think it was the first chief of the Air Force.
Yeah.
There shouldn't
still be first. It's getting ridiculous.
Not these
it's 2020. Like,
right.
I mean, a friend of mine even just posted something today, and this is slightly off topic, but still way on topic. 1974, one of the beaches in Boston, I think it was, Black people were literally pulled off the beach by cops because they weren't up. 1975. I get it. It's 2020. That seems like a long time. It was not that long ago. That was, our parents were alive, well alive. They were adults by then.
I was born not too long after that.
Exactly. Like, it's not even like, this isn't that long ago. And people want to act like, just get over. I actually had somebody who was like, you just need to sit down and talk about it and get the hell over it. Pardon my language, but
that's not something that you just get over, especially when those things still color the interactions that we have with each other today. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who, she made a post about when you walk on the same path as somebody, like if you're in the grocery store or on the sidewalk and you're passing someone. Mm-hmm. Pay attention next time. Watch if there's a white person and a person of color. See who moves out of the way first. See who acts as though that they are entitled to not have to move.
And these are unconscious biases that we see. We're not sitting here and being like, every white person's racist, right, or every Black person is scared of white people, or anything like that. Right. We don't think that at all. I mean, my family's basically white. I mean, I've got a blonde husband and blonde kids. I'm certainly not hating on any groups of people. Right. But it's just this idea of what's ingrained into our society. What are the expectations people have? And how have Blacks been trained? I mean, the title of our show, Not Too Black. Like,
well, and it also speaks to just why there's so many microaggressions and why they're overlooked. Mm-hmm. Because this is something that is such a natural part of our society that Blacks or people of color are less than white people. Well, even if it's not a conscious thought, it's still a thing of just like the whole white blessings foolishness.
Which we're going to touch on in a second, but right before I get into that, there was a post that I shared that said, racism is so American that when we attack racism, people think we're attacking America.
That's unpatriotic.
We're American. We were born here. Like, we can be anti-racist. Right. We're not anti-groups of people. We're anti-racist.
Exactly.
And, kind of touching, again, I'm getting off topic. This is just what happens. But, okay, when we're kind of looking back where people are like, well, I'm not racist, but you don't speak up against it. You don't call it out. Okay, maybe that's not your responsibility, whatever. But, that's almost like 1800s. Well, I don't own slaves. It's not a bit, it's wrong. I don't own slaves, but I'm not going to speak against it. I'm not going to say anything. But if we didn't have the abolitionists, the people that stood up, the people that were anti-slavery, it wasn't enough to just not be pro-slavery. You had to be anti-slavery. And that's what we need now if we're ever going to get past racism. We need people who are anti-racist, who aren't just sweeping stuff under the rug, telling people to get over it. It's easy to get over if you've never experienced it.
Right.
And I'm sorry. The fact that people are more upset about branding than they are about people being murdered tells me everything I need to know. It's not about the syrup. It's not about the branding. Honestly, it's a package. Okay, changing the package is not going to change the world. But what it does do is uncover people's hearts, their beliefs. Like, every person that was posting, I can't believe they're getting rid of the package. I haven't seen one anti-racist post, and somebody having to be like, I was on another post about it, and someone's like, I mean, I just need to be clear, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm sorry, if you need to say, I need to be clear, I'm not a white supremacist, then your actions and your words, if the shoe fits, like, nobody called her that, by the way. Right. She felt the need to clarify that she was not a white supremacist, which to me says you're acknowledging that the stuff you're saying and doing
falls in line with it.
Like, it's just kind of, I don't know. I'm just struggling. Like, I'm really, really struggling with the fact that people are more upset about plastic packaging than they are about the history in our country and what these things mean to women of color, Black men of color. Like, it's just mind-boggling to me. Like, when I first went into doula work, I remember being worried about being seen as the help. And I had some situations where that's how I was perceived, that I was like uneducated, or that I was just there to take care of the baby, that I didn't have these skills. And like, it took a long time to come up where I'm seen as the professional, as the person who has the skills and the knowledge to teach parents.
Right.
Like, getting into domestic type work, it's hard as somebody who's a person of color, because you don't want to get treated like the help. And there's nothing wrong with being the help. Let me just clarify that. There's nothing wrong with service positions. It's the attitude some people have towards those who are in service positions that are a problem. There's I respect anybody who works their tails off. I have the issue with the people that treat them
like they're less
than because of the career path that they're on, the job that they're taking. Like, anybody who feeds their family, you're amazing. I don't care what your job is, you are amazing. Yeah. But it's the attitude people have that we have a problem with, and it's hard. But we could go on this forever, so this is going to be longer than we said it was going to be. But let me just move on. So here's another fun one. Slavery as a white blessing. Can we kind of touch on that one a little bit? The white blessing.
I could not even understand. What in the world made him think that was okay to say that? So if you're not aware, there was a pastor who sat with Lecrae, who is a Christian rapper, and the CEO of Chick-fil-A. And they were having a forum about racism in the church and how to move past it.
I just have some serious secondhand embarrassment going on.
And he says that white people bristle at the term white privilege, and that maybe if we change the terminology, they'd be more accepting of it and more willing to work on it. And he said, why not call it white blessing, since, white people have been blessed from the curse of slavery. I didn't even want to hear anything else he had to say after that. And it's like, I don't care how many times he apologized after that. Forgive you. I hope that you are genuine in knowing that you were wrong. Yeah. But to call it that is so insulting to the people who are the descendants of those slaves. To call something a time period that was so horrendous, that was normalized as something, it was just insane. And it was condescending, and it was rude. And I can't imagine the position that Lecrae was in, or how he felt sitting there, because, we've both been in the position as the only. Mm-hmm. And there are times when and I think Lecrae talked about this too on his post, you feel like you can't respond, or you can't.
Well, you don't want to be the angry Black person.
Exactly.
You don't want to be the angry, because then it just feeds into this idea that we overreact or whatever. Like, you're not allowed to have emotion, despite the fact that people are treating you terribly. Sorry. No, thank you. Here you go. My wonderful parenting skills on display. No, not working. Okay. But we're not here to talk about parenting. We're here to talk about this. So it's just this idea of, like, it's uncomfortable to be the only. And one of the things that he said, and that totally resonated with me, was that he has been speaking up against racism in the church for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it puts you in a dark place. And he was so scared of speaking up and getting in that dark place again. And I can get that. Like, I think it was this morning. I was just like, I don't even want to do a video today. I'm sick of people. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of like calling people out on racism, especially in the church. It's like so disheartening because here we sit there on Sunday morning and we're told to love people and we're told to exemplify the love of Christ.
And we're also told that we're all made in God's image. And so for you to feel like you're more than someone else simply because of the color of your skin goes against that totally.
Here you go. Bye. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like here, toddlers are entitled. Toddlers tend to think the world revolves around them. They tend to think they can do whatever they want. They get away with it sometimes. But like they grow and mature. You're supposed to mature and realize like everything doesn't revolve around you. And here we're in a position where like everyone is kind of acting like they're entitled to privileges. And that they can, it's a privilege in and of itself to be able to call it a white blessing, first of all.
And to not see something wrong with it. That's the other part. Like, how did you think that was going to be okay to say?
I know.
Sorry, technical.
But yeah, like I don't know. I just totally relate with like that situation of him being in that. And I know that there was a lot of Black people that were upset with him for not speaking up. And I actually appreciate his humility in being able to say, I get that. I know that I hurt people and I'm sorry for the people that I hurt. But I also related to him saying like, I'm on the verge of I'm on the verge of a breakdown and I'm trying to avoid that. So I also respect his need to watch out for his own heart because it's hard. There are a lot of things like I've been in mom's groups, I've been in prayer groups, and like I'm not even comfortable going in a lot of them anymore. After seeing, because praying and church and it's such an intimate, vulnerable part of your life. And if there's people who, either don't respect your skin color or they don't respect the skin color of the people that you love, you're not going to be comfortable there.
Right.
And so and the white privilege thing and the just like, he was the only, like this expectation that this Black guy is going to sit here in a conversation with white and speak for an entire community. Like, no pressure, dude. Well, it's not fair.
And beyond that, there's also, I can imagine his worry about the backlash if he spoke out. Because if this is his community, if this is his church family, if this is his platform, I can imagine the nervousness, the fear, the anxiety that he felt trying to figure out the right thing to say so that he could still sound diplomatic, so that he could still speak in love, as a follower of Christ, still be able to speak against it in love and correct them gently, but also still say it in a way that made sure that he still had his dignity and that the dignity of the Black community wasn't undermined by his response.
Right.
Because that's the two-sided coin that we have. Like,
we can't be angry.
Right. Like, it's perfectly fine for the leader of our country to call people names and to flip out and to just be mean and cruel. But if President Obama, and
we're not getting political, but we're just using examples of systematic racism and cultural racism.
And I only say that because he is a man, and I understood why there were certain things that he and his family didn't even attempt. And they tried to keep their noses clean simply because the criticism that he faced. I mean, there was a whole stinking Obamagate because the man wore a tan suit for Easter, and it was, called unpresidential, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, imagine if he had flipped out. Imagine if he had called people sluts.
Just if he got angry, people
dumb. Right. Like, if he were as rude and snarky,
he wouldn't get away with it.
Right. And it's like,
at all.
And for me personally, I just don't understand how so many people can tout that he is the greatest Christian leader, that he represents the church and all this other stuff.
And we're not talking about policies here. We're literally just talking about character. We're just talking about character.
Right.
And this is all this is about. We're not getting political. We're not telling you about voting. None of that.
No.
We're just saying, like, as people of color, like, it's
insulting.
hurtful. So, like, it's just hurtful, I think, that people in the church are putting politics over valuing other humans, like overvaluing people. Like, it's kind of gross.
And,
it's hurtful,
to circle back around to the white blessings part, too, like, it's just ridiculous every time I say it. But for you to think that we have had to deal with uncomfortable terminology since 1619 and just deal with it and be told to shut up.
And there's nothing we could do about it.
So because your feelings are hurt or you're bristled because of the term white privilege, which actually is not all that insulting.
We're
it
like,
just
hey.
means that you are afforded some privileges in this country and in the world that we are not, simply because of the way people view us.
It doesn't mean you had an easy life. It doesn't mean you're wealthy. It literally just means you didn't lose opportunity because of your skin color. That's it. It's not saying your life was a perfect sunshine and rainbows. It's just saying, like, hey, some things were easier for you because of your color, you know. And it's just, I don't know. For me, the problem that I have with blessing is this idea that it's something God's gifted you,
not something you've stolen, not something
like,
you've raped.
It's almost like God gifted you slaves. Like, come on, people. Like, I don't know. That whole thing was just rough, kind of seeing Lecrae not knowing how to respond, because I've been only in a few situations, and I don't know, I kind of made a decision I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just not. You know, we had a situation where in our prayer group, we had somebody kind of argue with us about systematic racism within the medical community, which is hilarious in one sense because it's not debatable. It's literally a fact. The World Health Organization, American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, literally like major medical organizations are aware of this. March of Dimes is aware of this. We know that Black women face serious issues during pregnancy, literally because of racism.
And labor.
We're not talking individual racism. We're talking systematic issues that drastically impact pregnancy outcomes. Facts.
Yeah. And maternal care and wellness.
You know, to kind of argue with us and some other Black women and some like maternity care specialists, like midwives and doulas and doctors, like,
and also to invalidate our personal experiences that we shared. Like, hey, Black woman over here, this is what happened to me. And it's like, well, my husband's neighbor's, my neighbor's husband's cousin is Black, and they don't agree.
Yeah. But and then in that situation, I was kind of invited to be the only Black person in a group because she was uncomfortable with me. Which, if anybody knows me in person, I'm like 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. Like, I am probably the least intimidating person that walks this earth. Noelle is probably, my 3-year-old is more intimidating than I'm actually kind of scared of her. I'm not intimidating at all. But for whatever reason, I guess, and that kind of paints I don't know. That's a whole other story. But just this idea that,
that it's okay for you to have to defend yourself as the only person that is in your, it would be like a woman that's been raped and she has to go talk to or be interviewed by detectives, and it's a panel of male detectives interviewing this woman about how she's been violated by a man.
And there's no women around to support her. And we're not saying that these detectives are bad. We're not saying like they would be bad. I'm not saying that the people she wanted to meet with were bad. I trusted and loved every single person that she recommended. However, the dynamic, the historical trauma, it's uncomfortable.
It's intimidating.
It's very intimidating.
Because then you don't feel safe enough in a lot of circumstances to be able to share, to open up, and to say certain things in defense of yourself. And then especially because these are people who won't understand it.
Right, they can't have experienced the same thing. That would be like me trying to tell a military vet, I know what they went through. Because, I know, I've never been to war. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know what it's like to experience PTSD from war. I would be a jerk to go to somebody in the military and say, I've had some trauma too, I understand. No, I don't. Yeah. I can't pretend to know that. I can discuss things with them, I can have a conversation, but I'm not going to sit there and debate somebody who's experiencing PTSD from war that they're wrong.
Right.
Especially because major medical organizations recognize it.
Yeah, or that they're being too sensitive and making too big of a deal about it. Or they should just get over it because it happened a long time ago.
Right? I'm sorry, but nobody who's been to Vietnam can even complain. That was a long time ago. That's ridiculous. They shouldn't complain.
Right.
That sounds stupid. That sounds so stupid. But for whatever reason, people decide that Black people are not allowed to be upset about anything. And I don't know. We're kind of getting off topic here. Right. But, just the white blessing thing, I know that he got flack. This is the thing, too. He can't win. Lecrae got flack from Black people for not speaking up. And he gets flack from white people when he speaks up. If you're ever on any of his posts, If he mentions he can't win. He literally shared something about Juneteenth, which we're going to be discussing in our next video. And he got like hounded for sharing it. Like, how dare you celebrate being free from slavery? How dare you?
I mean, and if you don't want people to celebrate that, don't celebrate the 4th of July. Don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. Don't celebrate any culture's liberation from their oppressor.
It's dumbfounding. I don't know. Like, I'm just disappointed.
In humans as a whole.
I'm just disappointed because I'm struggling, really struggling to understand how people don't get it. Like, you don't have to get it to get it. Like, no, you're never going to experience some of these things, and that's fine.
Right.
But, like, no, don't call someone else's oppression a blessing to you. Like, just full stop. Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Right.
And don't pretend like somebody's overreacting if you've never experienced something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, I don't know.
Right. And don't blame I don't want to call Black people victims, but don't blame the victim.
Right.
Like,
the oppressed. Don't blame the oppressed.
If someone came to you and said, my husband's beat me and I need help, can you arrest him? Would you say to her, well, what did you do to make him hit you?
Well, sadly, some people do. And I
know.
think that's why we're in this situation. We've got too many people who want to stand up for the oppressor instead of the oppressed. And honestly, it's disgusting. And it makes me really disappointed in humanity.
Yeah.
It makes me disappointed, and I hate to say it. Like, I have amazing Christian believers. I'm not, speaking to that. But I don't know. I've just been really disappointed by the response from a lot of people in church. Like, being okay with oppression and not wanting people to speak up. And I'm sorry, but it's offensive.
Or not wanting to deal with being uncomfortable and having these discussions, because we're not going to move forward if you can't talk about it.
Right.
When you go to therapy, you have to dig up all of the ugly things so you can discover your triggers.
Right.
If there are certain things that are triggers for people,
deal with them.
You got to figure out what's triggering them and why it triggers them.
I still can't figure out why people are triggered by someone saying anything about Black people. Like,
So I think it's this. I think that some people feel guilty because maybe they've had some thoughts or said some things when no one was around. I think that sometimes people are worried that they're going to be viewed as racist simply because the topic comes up and they say, I don't understand.
Right.
And guess what? Not every Black person thinks that every white person is racist.
Of course not.
We do not think that.
Not at all.
However, if we call you out on something,
listen.
Thank you. Like, you may not understand why that bothers someone, but listen if they're telling you. It's like I tell my kids all the time. With 4 boys, they're always fighting. If one will just hum a video game tune just to be annoying. Mm-hmm. But he may not do it to be annoying. He's doing it because he likes it. Mm-hmm. And then another one will be like, oh my gosh, he's getting on my nerves. And I'm like, listen, I know that you didn't mean to bother him. But if he's telling you that that's bothering him, either move to another room or stop humming.
Yeah, work it out.
Don't be so self-consumed, self-absorbed.
That your desires are more than other people.
Right.
Yeah.
That your comfortability is more important than someone else's.
Yeah. And again, that kind of goes back to the whole toddler thing. Like, part of maturing is learning that the world doesn't revolve around you. And the world certainly doesn't revolve around Black people. And Black people bringing it up doesn't mean anything. It's just, I don't know.
Right.
And the one woman, forgive me for forgetting her name, the woman who did the Monopoly example.
I can't remember her name.
Okay, but, at the end, she says, everybody's lucky. We just want equality and not revenge. Like, no one is out for revenge.
Right. We're not looking
not
to reverse slavery.
No, they're just looking to be treated equally. And I don't really understand why people are so uncomfortable with that. But we should probably wrap that part up.
Right.
But just short things it's not a blessing. Slavery is not a blessing.
At all.
And don't overthink somebody not speaking up. Just because they didn't speak up doesn't mean something. Sometimes they're just too uncomfortable. I've been there. There's been times where afterwards I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I say something?
Right.
Because I was the only person there. I was the only person who was going to get it. But yes, we're going to wrap that up now. We could go on that forever.
But the next topic we wanted to talk about was the hangings. And I know that you had some strong opinions about that.
Well, here's the thing. I'm sorry. I'm not going to doubt that in this climate that there aren't people of color who are feeling suicidal. I'm not going to doubt that because it's a really, really hard thing to live with. But what I will say is, I don't see a black man ever, if he wants to take his life, ever doing it in that manner.
Hanging from a tree. So for those of you who are not aware, if you've been under a rock, that black people during slavery, through Jim Crow, through the Civil Rights era, particularly through the Civil Rights era, were hung sometimes ceremoniously by white people from trees. They would bring their children to the hanging. They would have a cookout during the hanging. They would have drinks and celebrate and do all sorts of crazy things. So the symbolism of a black person hanging from a tree is not something that you are going to find. And most times if someone's going to commit suicide, they're not going to do it in a public place.
But just that setting. So like, all that aside, I'm not saying that, a black man can't be suicidal, but I'm saying they ain't doing it from a tree. I'm sorry.
No.
It's not happening. It's just not a thing. And the thing that I was struggling with, I kind of shared that, and somehow it's just, people are more outraged by Aunt Jemima than they are about black men getting killed. And it's kind of gross.
And the fact that they try to justify this by calling it suicide or, and it's like, oh, well, the coroners have said lots of things. With the kickstart of all of this, with the George Floyd thing, the coroner said that he died from other things aside from asphyxiation. And thank God that his family had the sense to go get a private autopsy done, which said that he died from asphyxiation. Mm-hmm. Please do not think that with all of the systemic racism that there is, that there are not cover-ups for things to make it look like it's not what it is. Mm-hmm. Because they don't want the backlash or they don't want the uprising, which is, I think, is the fear.
I think that is the fear. And that's why I think that Monopoly video was so poignant. Nobody's looking for revenge. And I'm sorry, we've kind of been noticing, like, the woman who set the cop cars on fire in Philly was a white woman. Okay, it's not, at this point, the people that have been arrested have been white folks.
Or the ones caught on video, like the one who was spray painting Black Lives Matter onto the mayor's house or something like that somewhere. And clearly, when you look at the skin tone, we come in all different shades, but, or the graveyard, and someone jokingly said, no black people are playing around in the cemetery, because we're not. We don't, no.
We don't mess with that.
But
where the guy, in D.C., I think it was D.C., he was, chopping up the sidewalk, and they pulled the guy's mask off. And he's a white guy. The vandalism, the violence, yes, there's that group, that mob mentality, other people have joined in. Right. But when we're looking at who's getting arrested, they ain't black people.
And who's initiating it. But Wendy's, when the gentleman was just killed at Wendy's by the cop, mm-hmm. Who set the Wendy's on fire? It was a white girl that they caught on video. And there's a guy saying, I just want everybody to know we didn't start this. You see who's setting it on fire.
And the one in Nashville, the historic courthouse, a white guy. And are we ridiculously, we're not out here being like, oh, white people are the problem. And yet, people are like, well, it's the Black Lives Matter crowd, they're doing that. No.
It's not.
They're just looking for equality, not revenge. Nobody's out here looking, I'm sure there may be some humans, because they're human. But Black Lives Matter, whether you're looking at the organization or you're just looking at people who say Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter,
right.
They just want people to be treated fairly. They just want justice. Nobody's out here trying to take you down. We get it. You didn't have slaves. It was your great-great-grandparents. We're not mad at you.
And you may not have had slaves, but you also need to check to make sure what's been the thought processes that have been passed down from generation to generation as well. Mm-hmm. Because although you may not have owned slaves, that air of superiority may have been passed down from generation to generation.
For sure. And, nobody's exempt from biases. Every human can have a bias. Every human is capable of being prejudiced. But systematic racism is always from the people in power. And in America, black folks aren't in power. And there's also that level of elitism. We're not saying poor white people don't have problems because of classism. Right. Not at all. Heck, if everybody that's being oppressed by the elite would just stand up. But that's a whole other topic and post. So we're not saying anything other than, black people matter.
Right. And we're not saying that we're more than anyone. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that we deserve more than anyone. But it's also just like with the Monopoly analogy. If you started the race so far ahead don't begrudge us if we are looking. Sometimes give us a break if we're trying to catch up.
You had 450 more years. 450 more years. 450 more years. We've only had a few decades.
Right.
Like, cut people some slack.
Right. And it's like, in the thing, like I said before, the things that we've been hearing and saying online, like, if I hear affirmative action one more time, I swear I'm going to find a way to virtually slap somebody. Because
we don't condone violence, but the anger,
no,
like,
but it's so annoying. It's like, why do you think? Oh, so the situation. Do you remember the mom who got like 5 years in jail because she lied about where?
Yes.
And Felicity Huffman.
It's like a fine.
She got like 14 days.
And a fine.
And I'm like, listen, that woman was simply trying to afford her children a better education. And instead of asking yourself why, like, how could she do something like that? Ask yourself instead, why would she have to lie? What's so wrong with the school that her kids would have had to go to that she would have had to lie to put them in a better school district?
Right.
Why is there not equity among the school districts? I can tell you that even in Philadelphia, although it's one big city, all of the schools here aren't equal. The more affluent neighborhoods definitely get the bulk of the money when it comes to the schools. We're blessed that our kids are able to go to a pretty nice school. But at the same time, it's like, it's just not okay. And then for her to get 5 years for that, when she was simply just trying to make sure her kids, securing a better future for her kids.
Right, we get laws, we get regulations, but why did she have to do that?
For 5 years. And so now you've taken her away from her children for 5 years. Now you have caused trauma in those kids' lives from here on out. But then you have Felicity Huffman, who had the money to pay off someone to let her daughter into school.
And taking those spots from kids who earned it.
Right. And it's like, but you'll complain about affirmative action.
You don't earn public school education. You don't earn that. But college, at these elite schools, it's for people who have worked hard and shown serious academic skills and sports skills or whatever it is. And they've earned a place at a high institution because of their hard work. And that was taken. Yes, did that woman break the law by putting her kids in another school? Sure. But she wasn't taking. She didn't take somebody's spot. She didn't cause somebody else. So why is she getting so much more time? I'm not saying, we all need to just break the laws, but we do need to review why people feel the need to break the law.
Right. Because
what put them in this position? What put her in a position where schools are so unequal in the U.S. that somebody has to break the law to be able to get their kid a reasonable education? Right. What's wrong with our culture that's a thing?
And why is it okay? So, like I said, my kids go to friends who left the school, and their kids' biggest impression of it was, wow, look at the bathrooms. Like, how sad is that? How sad is that? Oh, and I also have to say, a friend of mine, she had posted in her Insta story that,
guys,
sorry. Can we pause it or no?
We can, but at this point, why not? Let's just wrap this up because our kids are losing it.
Yeah. They've been doing pretty good.
They have been doing very amazing.
But, so they moved out to a suburban area, and there have been some adults who question, online, do you even live here? Da-da-da-da-da.
It's 2020. People live everywhere.
Or did you see the man who chased down the teenage girls? Because he told them, I heard him say with my own ears, you don't deserve to be in this subdivision. You don't deserve to be here.
It's 2020, folks. This is why we're angry. It's why we're upset. We're not.
This is why we can't keep calm.
So I know that we just covered a lot of things, but just to kind of wrap it up, Aunt Jemima, learn about some history. It's just a bottle. It's just branding. I don't know why you guys are so upset about it when, there's people dying. Lecrae, we feel you. We get it.
White blessing is not a thing.
White blessing, Lou Giglio. Well, there was apologies made. Let's think about what allowed us to get to a point where we felt like that was acceptable. And you want to just wrap up the rest of it?
There's so much. So the hangings. And just the whole idea of elitism and classism and white supremacy and microaggressions. Look those things up, and also look at the difference between racism, bigotry, and prejudice.
Yes.
Because there are differences in all of them.
Yes. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you for listening. We're going back to being moms.